recording. Recording in progress. Awesome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hopefully everybody's having a great Friday. So let's go ahead and start talking about our announcements. So the first thing I'm going to point out is campus only. So if you haven't yet, I just posted, so most of y'all probably haven't seen it yet. Make sure that you are going to the announcements right here. This is where you're going to find the link. And let me unfreeze. So if you go to your announcements, you will find the link for Sunday's lecture. So just to let you know, we are having our third lecture. It is going to be virtual only. There is no campus counterpart. If you come to campus, I won't be here. Actually, I won't even be in the virtual lab. You'll meet Brian then. For that virtual lab, it will be at 8 a.m. Eastern time. It is not mandatory for you to show up to the live session, all right? But if you do not go to the live session, then you have to watch the archive because Lecture 3 is associated with all your Lecture 3 content. So with that said, also, we will watch, let's rewind. All right, so if you're going to lab on Sunday is essentially just an open lab. If you need help, there will be studio artists in the Discord. If you haven't joined the Discord, make sure that you do that. But we will have people there from noon until 4 p.m. that afternoon, Eastern time. All right, so if you want to utilize that, go for it. But since it's a Sunday lecture, we can't really mandate attendance, so pretty much everybody already gets it. All right, now, with that said, you do have to come back Monday. All right, that is a Zoom link that can be used, but you will not receive credit for attending that through Zoom any other session this month. You have to be here. So again, make sure that you're mindful of your attendance. Make sure that you're showing up to all your lectures and labs, so that way you do not miss out on those hours. Next, let's go right here. And again, make sure that everybody's aware of the Discord. So we already had like a good bit of chatter in there. That's awesome. But we do have Discord support sessions. I think she is about to hop off because she's going to be coming campus pretty soon. But for the most part, we do have scheduled sessions throughout the week. And they are in those voice chats where not only can you voice chat, but you can share your screen. They can actually get virtual assistants and help you walk you through your assignments. It was very quiet yesterday. So make sure that you're utilizing that. Do not wait until the last minute to try to get help. You want to make sure that you're utilizing these scheduled help sessions as much as possible, so that way you can keep up on your work. All right. Now, all that information, again, is inside of the course support section. So if we go right here, overview, course support, right there. Likewise, all my lectures is at the bottom of where we have the schedule for the month right here. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and check these out. Now, if you're somebody who wants to work ahead, awesome. Make sure that you're carefully watching these lectures, because there is 1 or 2 assignments that you have to make sure that you do them from this month's lecture, which in this case, Lecture 3, you have to build the prop from this month, all right? And it may not be the same prop that we did last month. So be mindful of that, but everything else, you should be good. Any questions about that? Another thing, we do host all our stuff on YouTube. Eventually that will change, but if you can, watch it with an ad blocker. We did not monetize this whatsoever. We want you to be able to watch it. The main thing is that we like about YouTube is how many people are aware of the fact that if you go right here, down to this little 3-dot button, you can actually have it show the auto-generated transcript. So if you're somebody that needs that text to have notes, that can be awesome for you right there. So utilize that. Now, with that, let's go ahead and talk about today's lecture. So before we can talk about today's lecture, we have to talk about competency 1.4. I've already seen a couple people already working on it, which is good. I just want to make sure that you're aware that we want to make sure that we get some core concepts in and talk about how it should be done, so that way nothing's getting missed. So let's see right there if we have any questions. If you use voice chat, it means that you can use voice chat and share the screen. Yes, awesome. Now, with that, let's go right here and grab the files. Actually, before we talk about that, let's go ahead and talk about the discussion, because your initial post is due today. How many people have already started doing your discussion? All right. So these are easy points. All right. As long as you meet 2 things. 1, you have to do a calendar. It can be any form of calendar. It can be a physical one that you actually wrote on and taken a picture of. It can be a word calendar, it can be anything. It has to just be a calendar. And the idea is that you're going to map out your month, and bare minimum, lectures, labs, maybe a few deadlines and all that stuff right there. But we see people more successful if they actually kind of map out their whole entire month, not only how much time they're going to work on assignments, but also like, scheduling time for yourself. We're not expecting you to tie yourself to your computer the whole entire month. So that is your calendar. But also, one of the things that people miss is the paragraph talking about your strategy for the month. People will submit the calendar and nothing else, and then they get a 0. All right. You have to have both. There is no partial credit for discussions. You have to make sure that that is in by the deadline for your initial post. It's actually broken up into 2 deadlines. There is no extensions for discussions. That's because other people depend on you getting your part done so they can do their part. All right, so make sure that you get that in. Paragraphs, at least 3 sentences, bare minimum. If I see that it's just like, great job, I'm not getting giving credit for that. Make sure that it has substance, all right? This is your way of interacting with each other. All right, on my end, it shows that it's due tomorrow. Yes, it is due tomorrow. I'm the one that sets these up and then I forget about. All right, so that is your discussion. Any questions about that? No extensions, no late submissions, and also no partial credits. It's only 2 points. All right, so with that, let's go right here and start looking at your 1.4. So your 1.4 competency is essentially a test of what you've learned in these first 2 lectures, all right? And with these first 2 lectures, everything that we're going to talk about, you can take that information and apply it to this project. So what you're going to do is go right here and scroll all the way down. Make sure that you read everything because people ask where the file is. It is down here in the instructions. And then we're going to go ahead and load this up. I'm going to copy that out. So I'm going to hit Control Copy. I'm going to go to my documents, 3DF. We're in week 1. This is actually not part replace of lecture 1 or lecture 2. This is competency. It's its own thing. So I'm going to paste that in. And then I'm going to go right here and load that up. Set projects and documents, 3DF, and week 1. Set that. So what this is you're going to have 12 different objects that you have to create, and they're in different tiers of difficulty. All right, we have tier 1, easiest. Tier 2, a little bit harder, and tier 3 is going to really get you thinking about how to work with these items. Now, to do this, there is a couple requirements. Now, if you are used to 3D and you know how to do things in 3D, get ready to hate this because we are going to tie your hands behind your back. So for this right here, you're not able to use any modeling tools whatsoever outside of 2 that we're going to talk about a little bit later. Everything else is going to be by creating an object, messing around with its default settings, and then manipulating their components to get the shapes that you need. Once you do that, you're going to do the professionalism and then put them on their own individual layers. Now, everybody's looking at me blank because you're probably going like, we know none of that. That's why I like to preface this lecture with that information, because every one of those items that we talked about, we're going to introduce them today. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that. So to give you an idea, these are going to be the objects that you're going to be working on. So we have Sketchfab where you can go in here and actually look at them in 3D. So we have on tier 1, the cup, the arrow, the scrunchie, the Lego man head. Then we have right here, the C shape, the car, the baton, and then the bat. And then lastly, on tier 3, we have the bullet bill, the pumpkin, the whip, and the gear. All of these are made without any modeling tools, and they're all one piece each. They're not made out of multiple objects. They're only one piece. What's up? What? Say that again? Well, I didn't hear the first part. Modeling tools are like extrude, bevel, all that stuff right there. The stuff that we're going to be talking about in lecture 3 that you're not allowed to use on this one. All right. Now, with that said, we do not have any tutorials outside of the fact that I'm a big fan of doing Easter eggs. So if you kind of read through a lot of content, especially on the Discord, maybe in the 3DF FAQ section, you may get some hints. But we do not actually give you really have walkthroughs for these, because these are supposed to be visual brain teasers. But at the end of the lecture, I will actually talk about how you can actually have some strategies on about going with this. I have a question about the discussion. I just want to make sure that it's okay that I would maybe have my calendar less full of the first week. And yeah, the week's almost done. You can go ahead and populate the rest of the week right there. So yeah, the main thing is just do a calendar and kind of put some thought into your month. I've seen it where, like, yes, I will give the same amount of credit to somebody who just does all the deadlines and your lecture and labs and that's it. But I've seen great ones where it's just like they mapped out, I'm working this much a day. I have a Final Fantasy raid on this time right there. They did everything. And that person got like almost 100 in the class. So with that, do we have any questions before we start? All right, so let's go right here. And who's messaged me? Oh, so with that, let's go ahead and load this up. So I'm gonna go right here to File, New, File, Open. And we're going to go and load up the amazing Polygon. All right. So everything that you see in games, movies, film, that has to be made. All right. So it doesn't magically happen. I know in the age now we're getting to AI generation, all that stuff right there. But the fact is that everything that you see, perceived, or conceptualized, we have to create. The thing is that throughout the decades of computer animation, we had to do it in certain different ways. And we had to do it with certain different types of materials. Used to, back in the day, we had to use something called NURBS, which is non-uniform rational B-spline. Pretty much, essentially, it was a way of getting objects smooth without having to have like a lot of power to do it with, all right? Because these shapes take resources to render. And the thing is that NURBS is by nature really, really smooth. They render really, really fast. The problem is that they sucked modeling with. The best way I can actually say is think of taking a handkerchief, a flat square handkerchief, and somehow pinning it in a way to form a face. That's what you had to essentially do. For every part of your face, you would have to take a little segment and kind of fold in the shape. And you didn't get direct control. Well, also at that time, there was something called a polygon. Now, a polygon is essentially a shape with more than 2 sides, because technically you can't have a shape with only 2 sides. All right, so it's any shape that has sides. And that was great. But major problem is that it is a harsh shape. It is a rigid shape. And the thing is that for us to get smooth parts, we have to increase the amount of geometry that we're using. And the idea of that is this. We go ahead, and again, these slides are available on the Discord inside the 3DF channel. And the fact is that right here, everything that we build is just made out of these square shapes, triangle shapes. Those are our polygons. And for us to get higher and higher resolution, well, essentially, we have to make more and more of them. Problem is that back in the day, they were intensive to render. Now, this is no longer a talking point in game consoles anymore, but used to, when you bought like a new game console starting with like the 3DO and PlayStation, their big thing was we can push this many polygons per second. We can render these many polygons. And over the years, we got more and more. Now, with current generation, we don't really have to talk too much about poly count because we're hitting this absurd amount. Is it the same as production? No, but it's good enough to like withstand everything. Now this generation is talking about lighting, materials, ray tracing, making stuff look more lively. But the fact is that as we started going, we started being able to render these more and more easy. And they became the preferred method of actually generating our shapes. So with that, let's talk about the different forms of polygons. So right here, and people always ask me about this scene. It's just a square and a triangle. But the fact is that if you want this, I can go ahead and post it on the announcements. Just remind me. Bleh. So right here are our 2 favorite forms of polygons. First is a triangle. And the reason why triangle is there is because at the end of the day, when we go to render, put anything in real time, everything becomes a triangle. It goes through a process called tessellation, 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 where essentially everything gets turned into a triangle. That's because triangles are the easiest shape in the world to calculate. It's 3 points. You keep track of those 3 points, and they're easier to calculate. Problem is that triangles are not the best thing to work with. They're not bad. They are used a lot, but they're not the best way to actually model stuff, especially when it comes to tool selections, different things like that. That's because of this. Our tools like to have surface direction. Now, I don't like bringing this tool up because people get too focused on it when in fact you do not need it, but it's great for highlighting some stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and activate my grease pencil. The problem is that when we go right here and have a triangle, well, our tools like something called surface direction. They like to go in one side, exit out the other. So if it goes through the top, it likes to go through the bottom. If it goes through the left, it likes to go through the right. Where's the top? Where's the bottom? Where's the left? Where's the right? One of those coordinates is missing. So typically when we use tools that use that surface direction, it will fail once it hits there. Now, again, triangles are not a bad guy. We actually use them a lot, but we have to be mindful about where we actually put them. So with that, let's go right here, clear that. That's where we enter into what we lovingly call a quad, which is a 4-sided face. And we like these is because we can actually use that as a train track. Our tools do see the surface direction. So if we have a tool that goes through the top, it knows to go through the bottom. If we have a tool that goes from like the left, it knows to go through the right. It can follow those surface directions, making our life easier when it comes to using tools and then also using selection types. What's even better is that they tessellate perfectly fine. If you have a quad, it's very easy to turn them into triangles. You don't have to worry about that geometry going somewhere else. It stays self-contained. Now, you're probably asking, well, what about anything over 4 sides? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Now, with that, I'm going to go ahead and clear that and bring this up. So let's talk about what we're seeing right here. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and pick out a piece of geometry. And if we look, we have a cylinder. And the fact is that cylinder is a whole entire ecosystem, an environment just made out of these 2 shapes, used over and over again to generate an object that we can see. Now, when we are actually looking at this object and we have it selected, we are looking at it, what is called object mode. Object mode. This is where if we select something and move it, everything that is part of that object comes along for the ride. It's one singular object. And that's great and all. We actually played around with that on our diorama. How many people got your diorama done? How many people went above and beyond and built like whole entire like ecosystems? All right, cool. Again, hopefully you didn't spend like 12 hours doing it. But again, people do get into that. But that was essentially us working with object mode. How many people felt that it was very limiting? You felt like limits of what you could do. Well, that's because right now we're actually working with the whole body, but we actually have anatomy of our polygons. And that's where we get into its different components. And to get to its different components, we can go right here with our object selected. Again, remember, context is everything. I have to have this selected or be close to it to get this menu. So with this selected, I'm going to right click and we will get this marquee menu. This is what we call a marquee menu. And with my right click held down, we can see all these different modes that we can go into. And the first one that we're going to talk about is object mode. That's the one that we're currently in now. But the best way to think about our components is a upside down triangle. So I'm going to go right here. Draw a triangle. And at the tip, it's going to be vertexes. So that's a check mark. All right, so we got a vertex. To get the vertex mode, all we have to do is right click and go to vertex. and we will get these individual dots right here. This is the smallest component that we can interact with. This is just a point in space with an X, Y, Z value, and that's it. And when we move it, that is all we move. Now, the next stage up is edge. That's supposed to be a G. All right. So, an edge is a line segment between two verts. So when we move around that edge, essentially we also move around the two verts that make up that edge. So if I go right here and select this, see now, when I select that edge, it's also moving the verts that connect up. Next is faces. A face is a surface that is completely surrounded by edges, enclosed by it. So if I move around that face, not only do I move around that face, I move around the edges that make up the face, and then the vertexes that make up those edges. And then finally, we have object mode. I'm just going to do OM. All right. And the best way to think about this is that upside down triangle. You're probably going like this. Okay, this is no dumb moment. But the thing is that when it comes to selections, certain types of selections are going to be easier for you. So knowing how one affects the other helps you. So if you can actually make the selection with face mode, what other selections can you also do that same selection and movement with? Everything underneath face mode. If you can do it with edge mode, that means you can also do the same thing by selecting vertex. All that comes down to what is easier for you to select. It goes down in that hierarchy. So, any questions? As I clear this. All right, so those are our core components. Now, we do also have to talk about grouping of these components, because how we interact with grouping of these objects is also important. Some of these actually make up the lifeblood of good modeling and how we can actually have great animation, like deformation. Like again, play around with your face, do all these kind of expressions. We have to make sure that certain core components are in the character's face for them to believably move. And the first one that we're going to talk about, as I get rid of this gnarly cylinder, the first one that we're going to talk about is an edge loop. So when we select an edge, that is an edge by itself. But if we double click an edge, it will select all the edges that it's connected to in sequence. This is what we refer to as an edge loop. An edge loop will keep on going until something stops it or it finds itself on the other side. Go right here and make a sphere. So if we look right here, if I select this edge loop, it will go all the way around until it meets itself on the other side. But if it meets something that stops it, like in this case, I select that edge loop, notice how it ends right here. Can anybody guess why it would end right there? It's the end of the sphere, or more fact that it is at the end of its track. There is no quad for it to go through. There is no surface. There's no top or bottom. It doesn't know where to go. And the reason for that is because of our next thing, which is if we go right here, if I select an edge, I don't know why the edges are so light today. So if we go right here, we have that edge selected. If I hold down Shift and double click the edge next to it, it will select all the edges that are parallel to it in a chain. The reason why our edge loops either stop and meet when they meet something or keep on going until they meet themselves is because of what we have right here, which is what we call an edge ring. An edge ring. And what that is essentially, the best way to think about is train tracks. It's going to follow those train tracks until they stop or run into themselves. That is our surface direction. It knows that, hey, if I enter in that direction, I can exit out the other direction. And how we control those is going to be fundamental to what we do with what we call topology. T-O-P-O-L-O-G-Y, which is a fancy word for the components that make up an object. Yes, topology is T-O-P-O-L-O-G-Y. When I have to stare up in like the ceiling, that's me trying to calculate, and I'll try to figure out what I'm trying to do. All right, so with that said, that is what we call an edge ring. Now, it also goes by a different name. That's because if we have edges selected right here for an edge ring, that also means that we can do it with another component, which is if I select this face and then hold down Shift and double click the face next to it, that is what we will grab. Is called a face loop. A face loop. F-A-C-E-L-O-O-P. It's the same thing as an edge ring, but we're doing with faces instead of edges. But it is still just following a train track. Yes, it is just right click to bring up this little menu. And again, just take notice to the hotkey call out that I have in the bottom corner. So everything that I'm touching and pressing down is going to display down here or over here, depending on whether or not I need to move it. All right. And then from there, with components, we can actually start getting more and more detail added to our objects just by drilling down. And you will notice that that's what you probably ran into with the diorama. You were trying to do stuff, you were trying to be creative, but you can only do so much with object mode. It's like playing with blocks. But this right here is where we start playing with clay. We can actually mold it, pull it, and have it distorted the way that we want. What's up? So what somebody just asked was how we select edge loops and how we select edge rings. For edge loops, we double click on the edge and we'll select this edge loop with a left click. Double left click will select the edge loop. Left clicking on one edge and then holding down Shift and double clicking the one that's parallel to it will select the edge ring. What's up? Vertex is a little fishy. That's why we will get into this a little bit later, but all our, so somebody was asking, can we select that with the vertex? So technically, if we select a vertex and double click on it, it's going to select all the vertexes that are connected to it. But there's a way of getting around that, which is I can double click on the edge loop, and we will not go too much in detail because we'll bring this up a little bit later. But if I hold down Control, right click, this will allow me to change any one of my selections to a different selection. So if I go right here and tell it to go to edge, or go right here to vertex, it will now select the vertexes. So Control right click will allow me to activate and change my selections to different modes. Translate it. All right. Now, with that, there is one last component that we have to talk about, which is one of these superpowers of polygons, because now we're getting in like hundreds of thousands, millions, in fact, when it comes to working with our models. And that's still a lot of stuff to calculate. And how do we go about doing that? Well, if we look right here, we can see that this is this drab gray. We'll talk about what that gray is a little bit later when we talk about materials, but it's supposed to emulate clay. But if we go right here and spin to the other side, what color are we seeing? Black. And the fact is that it's not actually black. We only light one side of our polygon because technically our polygon only has one side. Only one side gets rendered. How many people have ever played video games, especially with a third-person character, where you somehow get the camera stuck in the character's head? And you just see the eyeballs flowing? The reason why is because, one, you're not supposed to have the camera in their head, and two, does not actually render the opposite side. And what we're seeing right here is Maya helping us out. Maya will do some wonky stuff to help us out, so that way we can kind of see things that are not really there. But if we brought this into Substance Painter or Unreal, this is what we would actually see. And let me get something right here so we can actually really show what's going on. So see how this is like blocking there? Well, if we go right here and turn on back face culling, this is what Unreal and Substance Painter will see. Nothing. We only see the front. And to tell which way it is facing, that's where we get its normal. Normal. A polygon face normal is the direction that it's facing. All right, let's see. Somebody was asking about what's the goal of back face culling? Back face culling just culls the back face. It gets rid of it. Was wondering, aren't we going to go over NURBS in this class for any reason? The reason why we don't go over NURBS is because they're not so much obsolete. No one really uses them. And they're a pain in the ass to work with. We still do use NURBS tools, but we use them to actually output polygons. All right, so with that, any other questions? That's the anatomy of our polygon and how we can kind of bounce between those different components, how we interact with it. It's going to be the lifeblood of what we're going to be doing with modeling. Now, before we go any further, let's talk about selecting things. Go right here. All right, so got a couple things in here. All right, so you're probably going like, well, you just select things, right? Well, yeah, you go right here, you select something. What does green mean? Who remembers what green means? What? Not so much object mode. So if I go right here, I should be a little bit more specific. All right, so if I select everything, what does green mean? Yeah, the last one selected or the lead one. All right, what does white mean? Yeah, it's just part of the selection. All right, so probably right now, you're either going right here and clicking on things and selecting them, or you're doing marquee. Now, if you've been adventurous, you probably already learned shift select, right? All right, so shift select is what we call a toggle selection. So I'm holding down shift, left clicking. So it will toggle between selected and not selected. So if I go right here and select these, notice how it reversed that. That's because shift is a toggle. Now, if you already learned that right there, you're on a good clip. But the fact is that there's other ways of selecting, which is when it comes to, bless you, we go right here. Let's go into vertex mode. And here's one of the things that can kind of like really slow you down. Like, let's say I want to select some objects and hold down shift, and I'm adding stuff right there. Well, the problem is that it's not a great way of doing loose, dirty selections where you don't have to go in and be meticulous. That's where we enter in Control Shift Select. Control Shift Select. What this is an additive selection. It will never deselect. So Control Shift Select will always add. It will never deselect. And then lastly, we get Control Select, which will always deselect and never select. And the reason why I bring that up is, let's say I want to select all these spaces here and here. Well, I could go right here and hold down shift and one by one select my stuff. Oh, I missed that one right there. Or if I know the different types of selection, select the whole thing, deselect the center, and now I have them both selected. You have to practice with these right here. I know it sounds like you're just learning this. I'm telling you, go as fast as you can. But the thing is that if you learn the fast way, it helps. That's why we learn hotkeys instead of going into the menus. That's why we are going to learn marquee menus later. Because if we can instill that kind of muscle memory into you. It frees all that brain power to focus on the steps that you need to do when you need to make something. What are the hotkeys for deselect? It is Control Select. Now, last but not least, my favorite one that is actually a new one, by which when I ever say something's new, it's probably 3 years old by now. But if I hold down Tab, what this will allow me to do is paint and drag over what I need. So Tab Select will paint over what I need. And what's cool is that it is what we call camera-based. And what camera-based selection means is that I can only select what I can see. That's because right now with selection, if I go right here and marquee select this, well, Maya doesn't see the back of the sphere, but it's still there. So that way, when I actually select it, it lasers through. So when we actually do regular selections, it will go all the way through. We have to be careful about that. So tab select is pretty cool because we can only select what we can see. It is what we call camera-based selection. So what I did was I selected the whole entire, somebody's asking how I selected the top and the bottom of the cylinder. I selected the whole entire cylinder and then I held down Control and deselected all the faces in the middle. So with that, let's go ahead, close this, and introduce you to the dark side of modeling. So probably noticed that I only talked about triangles and quads, four-sided faces. But what about everything else? Well, the problem is that those are the most preferred ways for our pipeline. They work best with our tools. They work best with when it comes to rigging. It works best when we're doing animation and deformation. But the fact is that there is a longer list of stuff that does not work kindly with all that. And that's where we get into what we call problem geometry. Problem geometry is the stuff that will break our pipeline. Now, I'm just going to introduce this to you, but we will talk about this next week on how we go about finding these and fixing these. Because theoretically, if you follow the instructions for 1.4, you should not get any of these issues. But that's a utopia idea. More likely, you'll probably run this issue right here. So you have to be aware, this is the reason why your tools don't work, your selection doesn't work, or anything like that. It's because of these right here. So with that, do you want us to keep our 3D art exactly like yours, or does it need? So for activities, yeah, you want to match up to me as much as possible, especially since we're trying to illustrate a activity. Later on, you will have a little bit more flexibility. So just for right now, yeah, you kind of want to match up with us. All right, so with that, we have problem geometry. And the thing is that only this right here is problem geometry. But this right here is what we call troublesome geometry. Not necessarily bad, but can cause issues if extreme or in the wrong area. And that's because of the nature of polygons. So first one that we're going to have is non-planar face. So non-planar face is essentially we have all the points of our objects, but not all of them are on the same plane of existence. Blah. All right. And the problem that causes is this. We look right here. We have 3 dots that are on this plane right here. But then we have one that's way off to the side. And this is where the trouble is happening. We look. Are you seeing that crease? All right. So rule of thumb. You cannot have distortion of your object, your model, your mesh, without a component to support it. You cannot have a bend. You can't have like an angle, nothing. There has to be a component to hold that. So right here, if we look, we have that crease. There should be an edge there. But Maya is being a friend and going ahead and drawing it anyway. The problem is that when it comes to rendering, Maya can make 2 decisions. So we go right here and ignore the tool that I'm about to do. You can't use it this week. But right now, it is drawing it this way, which is great. And if we had the edge right there, awesome. But it could also choose to draw it this way. Two completely different shapes, correct? Well, the thing is that mine is a little bit schizophrenic. And when we go to render, well, we're doing video, so we have like 24 frames per second, 60 seconds per minute, so and so and so and so until we get the whole entire movie. The thing is that Maya, based off the camera angle, can cause this to break in different ways. And if we don't have that component in there, it can make that choice on the fly, causing what is called flickering, where it pops in and out. And the thing is that it will do that every frame of our animation. So we have to make sure that it's not too crazy. Do you want us to say n-gons? Yeah, that's what everybody calls. So we'll get to n-gons in a little bit. Now, the reason why this is troublesome is that while this is extreme, that right there is perfectly fine. It's still non-planar geometry, but it's not going to cause an issue. And the thing is that right now, this month, you're going to be doing what is called low resolution to mid resolution modeling, which is the number of polygons you use to make an object. And you're going to try to get the most out of those polygons, which means you're going to have a little bit of tugging on that. That's perfectly fine, as long as it's not extreme. Wrong, perfectly fine. Next, we have concave faces. Concave faces is where we have a vertex going into the surface area of a face. Problem is again, going back to my handkerchief analogy. If I was to take a handkerchief, pin down 3 corners, and then take the 4th corner and start pushing it into the surface area of the handkerchief, what would eventually happen? It would not so much rip, but the extra stuff in the middle would start overlapping, flipping over, and popping over. And that can actually happen right there, where we will actually look like we have a polygon face that is just kind of folded in half, like, a sandwich. And again, leads to flickering. Or another term is Z, the letter Z, fighting, where we have 2 surfaces on top of each other, and they're fighting over which one to display. Now, this is bad if it's in an area that is highly deformable, like a cheek or anything like that, or if it's really, really big on our surface. But if it's really, really small in an area that does not bend, it's perfectly fine. Likewise, convex. Convex is where we have 3 uniform parts of our objects, and then we have 1 completely off the grid right there. And the thing is that this is different from a non-planar face because they're all on the same level. And the thing is that when it comes to making models, especially in 3D, especially doing characters or anything like that, uniformity is important. Having everything nicely spaced can lead to better deformation. So issues like that can cause weird bending, especially like it likes to pop up right here on like your elbows, especially when you're doing character modelings. The thing is that it's not bad if it is small. We just have to make sure that it's not an area that is going to bend too much. So with that, making sure that I'm not missing anything. All right. So those right there are our troublesome geometry. As long as they're not extreme, we don't have to worry about them. But these, we do have to worry about. Some are worse than others, but again, they will break our tools. They will break the way that we work with our stuff. So we have to be mindful. That's where we get into n-gons. N-gons is pretty much any polygon that is over 4 sides. That n is a variable. If it was 20-sided, then this would be a 20-sided gon. If it was 50-sided, it would be a 50-sided gon. And the reason why this is an issue is going back to that tessellation problem. Everything becomes triangles. Well, quads are great because those divide very, very easily. But I could probably take this shape and hand it to this front row and tell them to turn it into triangles, and I would probably get 5 or 6 different results, which means that's like Maya. Every frame, it will decide to tessellate it a different way if we do not lock in that shape. So we have to be careful. We always want to go back and quad that up. Next is what we call a face with a hole. We cannot have detail inside of the surface area of a face without the geometry to hold it. So anybody see anything missing from that? Let me go ahead and zoom in. So we're missing the edges to hold that. There's none of them there. And essentially we have a detail there, but we removed the things that actually kept it there. The best way to describe it is think of it as a suspension bridge with all the cabling right there. Somebody made that bridge and then decided to cut all the cables and hope that the bridge stayed up. And the problem is that right now Maya's helping us see this, but this is fundamentally broken to the point where we can't even fix it. The only way to get rid of it is to remove the affected geometry. Now, faces with holes is a little bit misleading. That's because it doesn't always have to be a hole. Let's go right here and clear this. And let's actually make this right here. When you mentioned that you wanted us to screenshot or work, is this app only supposed to take, so we'll definitely have to answer something like that a little bit later. We want to keep questions focused on the current content. All right. So right here, I made a little peg. And then the number one reason that this happens is students' misunderstanding of being efficient with their modeling. Which being efficient with your model is that if something's flat, we don't need 300 edges to make it flat. We can be efficient and just kind of keep our poly count low. But the thing is that edges and edge loops serve two purposes. One, to change your shape, and two, to preserve it. So if I go right here and remove those edges right there, they look flat. They didn't look like they were doing anything, when in fact, they were there to preserve this shape right here. And this right here is what we call a face with a hole. Because there's nothing technically holding the shape in. Maya is just holding it there because of the math that is still present. If we try to go back and, let's say, draw all that stuff in and draw that edge back in, Maya won't let us do it because it doesn't know how to draw that face anymore. The only way to fix that is to remove that area that's affected and replace it. So next, lambda faces. Lambda faces is one of the hardest things to kind of force to happen, but it's very, very easy to make it happen by accident, which is essentially what I like to call a polygon pizza pocket. We cannot have two faces on the same surface share all their edges and verts with each other. So right here, we actually have two faces. There's one right here, and there's one directly underneath it. All their edges are welded together. All their verts are welded together, which is a problem because if they're welded together and they share all their own same edges and all the same verts, there should not be two faces. There should be only one. It should have collapsed down to one. But somehow the math got wrong and both of them are still there, causing what we call lambda faces or the pizza pocket. Next is going to be the bane of your existence. Non-manifold geometry. Geometry that mathematically should not exist. All right. And it comes in three flavors. Now, I'm never going to quiz you on like, hey, that's a type 1, that's type 2, type 3. You just need to know that there is three different ways of doing this. First, an edge can only be shared by two faces. You cannot have it share more than two faces, like this. That's because an edge has no mass. So we can't pull out more surface area out of something that is already self-contained. That's like me going up to a hair follicle of yours and then pulling out a new you, all right? You have to have an edge only be shared by two faces. Next, we can't have an edge that is shared by two faces that are what? Can anybody guess what is going on there? Your opposite directions. Their normals are facing the opposite way. So we cannot have two faces be connected by an edge, but their normals face off in opposite directions. That's like halfway on your arm, it decides to like take your muscles and flip them outside. You know, goes inside out, vice versa. So you cannot have that. What's the worst? All of them are worse. Everything's bad. We don't pick favorites. All right, last but not least, we cannot have two faces share a vertex, but no edges. Because again, it's a point in space. There has to be something of substance connecting them. Now, all of this right here, and it seems like, I'm breezing through it. That's because really I'm just trying to put it on your back burner. So you're aware that not everything's perfect. Here's the thing. Maya doesn't give a crap about you making problem geometry. Like, it will never scream at you. It will never do anything like that, as long as you fix it later. Later on this month, I will show you that I will actually make problem geometry that helps me model, but then I go back and remove it. Problem geometry is only a problem if it prevents you from your next step. And the thing is that you have to be aware of it. So that way, when things break, you know why. It's one of these bunches of gremlins. So this is going to be a subject that we're going to be re-talking about throughout the month. All right, any questions so far? I don't understand type 2 and type 3. So type 2 is we cannot have two faces share an edge, but they're normals, which is the way that they are pointed facing the opposite directions from each other. So this one right here, this face is facing down, this face is facing up. Likewise, we have to have at least one edge connecting these two faces. We cannot have it be shared by just a vertex. All right, so with that, making sure I'm staying on track. Talked about that, talked about that, talked about that. Now, let's talk about this. All right, manipulating the objects. So when it comes to actually building our objects, we are not forging everything out of thin air. All right, we actually get a bunch of shapes that are for us to use for free. Well, not for free, you still buy Maya, but it gives you those free shapes. And the idea is that everything around you, everything that you look at, can be broken down to a basic shape. Sometimes it's very obvious. So like right here, if we look at that trash can, what shape comes to mind when we look at that trash can? A cylinder. So we can start with a cylinder. Instead of me forging it out of nothing, I can take a cylinder and start building off of that. If I wanted to make a basketball, what would I use? Probably sphere, things like that. So knowing what is available to you is important because it can save you time. You've always heard of that whole idea of not trying to hammer a square peg into a round hole, or maybe vice versa. This is the same thing right here. Any experienced modeler can take those objects and make it into something else, even if it's not intuitive to use that. But why? The thing that you have to realize is that, yes, you want skill, but you also want to save time. You will never get time back. So if you can work smarter and faster, then you can reserve that resource that you can never get back. Also, hint, 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 I will tell you, you may want to be aware of everything that you can create. So if you haven't yet, let's go right here. File, new, don't save. If you haven't yet, do yourself a favor. Go to create polygon primitives and make every one of these. Make every one and note what shapes are available to you. They'll help you later on. They may actually help you on your 1.4 competency. All right, so definitely spiral seems difficult. That's why we get a spiral for free. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and talk about primitives. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and make like a glass cup. All right, so I'm going to go right here and glass cup. And let's get some reference. We should always model with reference right here. So I'm going to go ahead and you know what? That looks good. So we're going to actually make this. So when we look at this glass cup, what object comes to mind? Cylinder. All right. So let's go ahead and go about doing that. Let's go ahead and make a cylinder. Now, at this point, we're not going to do any modeling. We're not using any modeling tools. We're not using anything more advanced than what we've learned so far, which is components and primitives. So we got a cylinder. So let's go ahead and make this bigger. And so we got a cylinder for a cup. All right. Is it done? No. This is a crap cup. So please, just hint, hint. You may be making a cup later if you turn this in. As your cup, you won't get credit. So I'll throw out hints like that. So if we need to make a cup, what should I do? With what we have so far? Well, we can do faces. So I'll go right here. Select those faces and, well, can't do much there. We can do maybe edges. Same thing. So we could probably go right here and do the verts. So are we done? Does that look like a great cup? Yeah, that's a shit cup. Nobody wants to drink from that. All right. So what issue are we running into? What? No, we can't extrude. We can't use any tools, but yeah, it's a cone and mill and it's not flats. So how do we add more detail? We just need more components, right? We need more edges. We need more faces, right? Well, the thing is that we can actually add that in. So when we make an object, what we're doing is actually making an object with a certain list of settings. And by default, we already have a set list of settings. And to get to those is right here. If I go ahead, delete this, when we go to create, every one of our menu items right here, if we look, we will see a little box off to the side. How many people have seen those boxes? All right, so what those boxes are is if it has a box, it has settings that we can change. This allows us to go in and change its settings. So if I go right here to my cylinder, hit the box right here. If we look right here, this is how it's going to generate that with all these attributes. We have radius, we got height, we have axis divisions, we have height divisions, we have cap divisions. And by default, we get 20 along the axis, we get 1 along the height, and we have 1 along the cap, which those are our edge loops. Those are, when we talk about divisions, those are the edges. That's how much resolution we're giving our object. And we can change that. So we can go right here if I wanted to, bring up the radius, bring up the height. Let's go ahead and crank up that axis division. Let's go right here and turn up the height. Go right here to the cap division, hit apply. And we get this. Who's ready to make a cup from that? Yeah, a couple people. All right. So obviously we would not want to make a cup with that. When it comes to modeling, too many people, especially beginners, they overrun their geometry with like edge loops and edge flow and all that stuff right there. Problem is that the more geometry you start with, the harder it is to get basic shapes. So you want to always start small and work your way up. Add as you need them. Problem is that right now, which one did I add too much to? Can anybody guess? So, you know, probably the height divisions is too much. Probably the axis divisions. Problem is this right here. If you're experienced, you know what all this means. Problem is that you probably don't know what all that means. This is not intuitive. So while this is a great way to interact with this, probably not the best way to do it. So let's instead reset my settings. I'm going to go right here to edit, reset. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete this and hit create. Now, to let you know, whenever you see these two buttons, just kind of like a little side bit, these do almost the same thing. What this does is use the tool and then close the window. Apply, uses the tool, but keeps the window open. That's the difference between them. So I'm going to go right here. I don't want this open anymore, so now I'll hit create. And we got our basic cylinder here. So who remembers when we see a cylinder, what does Maya actually see? Who remembers? Not so much triangles, but we see an object. What does, we showed the little box in a different window. Who remembers what Maya actually is? N-O-D-E, node based, yes. So it is a bunch of math in the background, and online got that. So if we go right here, and let me get back to general. With this selected, what I'm going to do is go into my sidebar and make sure that I'm picking out my channel box and layer editor. Channel box and layer editor. Again, go into my side area and make sure that the channel box and layer editor tab is selected. If you don't see it, you have to click on this button right here. And what the channel box is essentially, as we move stuff around, this is its address. When we move stuff, rotate stuff, scale stuff, we're actually updating its channels. This is its address in the world. But underneath it, we have its inputs. If we click those inputs, if we look right there, that is all the math that we saw in that settings. That is how we get access to that node, that we can go back and change that math. Which means I can intuitively figure out which is which. So if I go right here to subdivision axis, let's see what this does. Go right here, type in 40. Go right here, type in 40. One more time. Go in here, type in 40. And now we have subdivisions along the axis. Now we know what that means. So that obviously isn't the right one. So I'm going to go right here, type in 20. Now let's go to the height, and I'm going to type in 40. So subdivisions along the height. Is that the right one that we need to actually make the inside of a cup? Nope, not really. So let's go right here. It's 1. And then last but not least, let's go right here and type in 20. And that right there is definitely the ones that we need. We need to actually have something to keep the rim where it needs to be and then have it recede down. So that is giving us the geometry. Way too much geometry, but we're now seeing what we need. But typing in numbers is a little annoying so far. So we did the menu, which we have to kind of guess what we need and hit apply and then hope that it's the right one, delete it if it's wrong. Then we have this right here, which is a little bit more intuitive, where we can actually type in the numbers and actually have it update. But let's take this a step further, which is hopefully everybody has a mouse or a middle mouse click that they can get access to, because we're about to use the hell of it. So whenever we select on an attribute's name, when we select the attribute's name, we can go right here and middle mouse click and drag left or right, and it will act as a virtual slider. And we can do that with any attribute. If I go right here to transform X, without even touching this right here, I can actually transform it by turning this into a virtual slider. Anything that I select, I can turn into a virtual slider. So let's go ahead and add in enough edge loops for us to make a cup, but not add in too many where it's going to make our life harder, which means we need something to hold the rim and then something to bring in the hole. So we need at least 1 and then 2. So right now we have 1 already. Let's add another one. So from right here, let's go ahead and start making the rest of our cup. So I'm going to double click this edge to select, what is this called? Edge loop, exactly. And I want it closer to the other edge right here. So that way I have a thinner rim. Can anybody guess how I should do that? Not adding another one, but I can either translate, rotate, or scale it to make it closer to the outside rim. Scale, exactly. We go right here and just take that edge loop and scale it out. We can go ahead and move it closer to the outside rim. So that way it's a lot thinner. If we try to do that with move, this is what we get. So next, we need to sync this down. So if I want this to go down here, what should I select? What would probably be the easiest selection I can make? What? Not W, but like what components have we talked about so far? Edges, faces, verts. Which one would probably be the best one to manipulate to get the inside of my cup? Faces. Exactly. We could do edge loop. The problem with that right there, we bring down the edge loop, it's leaving its buddy behind. We could select the vertexes, but that's a little bit more wonky because if I select all that, we accidentally select all those. But in this case, let's go right here. Face mode, hold down tab, select those faces, and then start bringing them down. Now, it's a little bit hard to see what's going on. So I wish I could see through my object, but see the skeleton. What should I press? 4. All right. And I just showed the answer to my next question, which is it's a little bit hard to see how close to the bottom I'm getting. So if I want to remove depth and see it from different angles, what should I do? Spacebar, which is R for panel view, exactly. So hopefully now you're kind of seeing how everything that you learn is kind of wrapping itself together. Like everything has its place in the way of how we manipulate our objects. So if we go right here, I'm in my front view. I can bring this down. I can scale this out. And bam, we have a cup. What's up? So what somebody just asked was, is there a way to bring in a reference image so we can see it? Yes, we're not doing that yet. Yeah. Also, at the same time, you don't need reference for that right there. Outside of the reference that we're using for our 1.4, you will get a chance with that. But yeah, once we actually get into like real modeling and doing the prompts, we will show you how to bring in image planes. What's up? No, that's what I'm here for. Yep. How does the edge connect when it concaves versus when it goes down? So what somebody just asked, which is great right here. So what makes this not a face with a hole? It's these edges. What makes this not a hole is because these edges right here are pretty much tethering this side to this side. If I was to go right there and hit delete, that would be a face in the hole because there's faces there, but there is no strings, there's no wires connecting them and keeping them preserved. All right. Now, any questions? What somebody said was they want to see how we can add multiple lines. If I go right here, you can add multiple lines. Like, let's say I wanted to, and again, like I said, I like to add in Easter eggs. So let's say I wanted to make like a pointed stick right here. Well, I already got my point right there, and we're not going to do any modeling. So for me to actually make kind of like a pointed stick and have it like narrow, I need to go right here and add in more subdivisions along the height. And again, if you don't know which one it is, what my favorite thing is, learn by doing. If you don't know what something does, it's completely okay to select it, and especially if it's a slider, yank the hell out of it to see what it does. All right, so for this right here, we can go ahead, select the attributes, and right-click left and right. How would you go about adding a handle? So we're not going to get into that because, again, that is part of modeling. We are keeping it basic. So from here, I can go ahead and let's say I want this to be a little bit more narrow. And go ahead and make that. And then go right here, take the bottom and bring that down. If I wanted this to be a lot more wavy, I would probably add some more edge loops before I started distorting it too much. And then I can do all that stuff right there. So again, everything that we've shown so far is not modeling. We are not using any modeling tools. We are only using the attributes that we have so far. And you're probably going like, all right, why are we focusing so much on this? Because too many people hop into the power tools way too fast when they're not comfortable with actually just working with the core components that are already there. You got to get used to actually taking these components and manhandling them and getting them into the shape you need. What's up? Nope, we're just taking the core components and moving. It technically is modeling. Anything that you do with a model is modeling, but when people think modeling, they think using different tools that are available, like, extrude, all that stuff right there. And the thing is that we're just adding more geometry from the settings and then just moving them around. All right, a cup and a stir stick. Awesome. Gotta follow the rules exactly. Can you model on top of the components? Yes, not this week, but you will eventually learn. You're going to do this. This is a great foundation step, and then you use the tools on top of it. All right. Now, with that said, we got our stir stick. I guess that is a stir stick right there. You don't have to build this right here. So we got our object right here. We add more components and all that. So I went ahead and let's say, you know what, this looks good, but I want to render this out. Well, usually when you render something out, you want it to be higher resolution. And if we look, it's kind of janky all the way around because it's really blocky. There's not enough geometry. So what should we do? Just add some more geometry? Well, let's go right here, add some more subdivisions along the axis. So again, I can't stress this enough. At the end of the day, we saw a cup. We are intelligent beings. We can actually look at stuff and perceive what it is. Maya is one block of math hooked into another block of math and hooked into another block of math. And this is where we get into what is called history. As you build stuff, you build a ledger. And how many people have ever used Photoshop? All right. So in Photoshop, you have a history list. And you can actually go back in your history and make changes, but it has to make it through the rest of the history that is after it. Same way here. As we build, we add another train car to our train. And the thing is that when we create this object, that's caboose. And as we build it, move stuff around, we add another cart, another cart, another cart. Well, the thing is that if we go back to the caboose and change something, then essentially we have to make it through the other carts before it gets displayed. That's like if the caboose has the cafeteria, that's like carrying a soup all the way through the train to the main engine. You're probably going, if there's enough carts, you're probably going to spill that soup. And that's where, long analogy short, once you start modeling and changing that shape, you lose the ability to change the primitive defaults. You cannot go back and change that history once you start changing its shape because it doesn't know how to adapt to that. And that's what we call history, which brings us to our first thing of professionalism, which is something you have to do. So everybody likes to build, everybody likes to create, everybody likes to make art, right? How many people like cleaning stuff up, organizing stuff, naming things? All right, a lot more hands than I thought. All right, so that's where we enter in professionalism. The things that you have to do so that way your art can go elsewhere in the pipeline. If you are modeling like a transformer and everything is disorganized and everything is not named, you hand it over to your texture artist is going to hunt you down and stab them with their Wacom pin. All right. And the first one that we're going to talk about is history. As we work with history, it will build up and all that history is active. You can edit it, which makes it very destructive. When I'm talking about saving the increments, this is how prevent that from happening, which is sometimes your history can get corrupted and your beautiful device, your beautiful model will explode. So to prevent that from happening, what we can do is select our object and tell it to edit, delete by type, history. We can delete our history. And we'll remove all that volatile information because right now, without the history, essentially what it is we took a cylinder, we add some subdivisions, and we pull down that surface right there. We made it a cup. We delete history. Now to Maya, it's just cup. There's nothing to alter. It's always been that way. So with that is our first stage right there, which is history. Now, when should you delete history? I would say every few saves to be safe. It's okay to have some history because sometimes you will go back and edit some that. That is actually more of an advanced move. But I would say every few saves, delete your history before you save. What's up? All you have to do to delete history is select your object, go to File, wrong, Edit, delete history. Delete by type, history. Edit, delete by type, history. All right. Now, there's no way to organically bring this into the conversation, so I'm just going to ham-fist it in. The next thing that we're going to talk about is that when we have our objects, the next level of like professionalism we want to do is organize it based off of what we need to see. So if we're working on a giant level, and I'm only working on like the crate placement of like this one warehouse, I don't need to see the whole entire wasteland that that warehouse is in. So I would like to organize it based off of what I need to see at that time. That's where we enter in display layers. So at the bottom of the channel box right here, we have display layers. And what this will allow us to do is I can go right here to layer, create empty layer. And this will create a display layer. Now, nothing's on it right now. So to add an object to a display layer, all I have to do is select it, right click on the layer, and tell it to add selected. Likewise, if I add something to the layer, I don't want it to be there, all I have to do is select it and tell it to remove it. But in this case, right click, add selected. Now let's go ahead and double click on the layer. This is where we can edit it. And for here, I'm going to name this cup layer. As I type every key other than the ones I need to. All right, so with that, we're going to name it cup layer. And then from there, we have something called display type. First one, normal. That means we can see it, we can move it, we can do all that stuff. Next one is template. Template will essentially turn it into wireframe, and it becomes unmovable, unselectable. Next is reference. Reference mode puts it in shaded mode, but it still cannot be selected or moved. And what that looks like is this. If I go right here and close this, after I hit save, all right, so right here we have three little buttons. We're going to ignore the middle one. That deals with animation. All right, so the first one, you'll see a V. V means visible. V is visible. No V is not visible. Pretty straightforward. But this last one is our display types. When we are seeing it without nothing in it, that is normal mode. We can do whatever the hell we want with this. We're good. But if I go right here and click it once, we get template. Template mode means that it's wireframe. I can't move it. It just locks it down. This is a way of having an object there that I need to be aware of, but I don't want it taking up resources. So I don't want to accidentally select it, move it, all that stuff, but I want to be aware of where it's at. Next is reference mode. Same thing as template, but it's in shaded mode. You're probably going like, why would I want that there? Again, if I need that depth, but 9 times out of 10, this is for reference images, because when we bring in images, we can actually select them by accident and move them around. This is a way of us being able to see the images, but not having to select them. And then once we click R again, we can move this around. Yay. All right. Any questions? All right. So if you're doing a checklist of what you need to do for 1.4, so we've already talked about polygons. We talked about components. We've already talked about problem geometry, which that'll rear its ugly head a little bit later. We talked about primitives and the shapes that we can use. We talked about how we can change those default settings of the primitives if we need more geometry. Then we also talked about the first two things of professionalism, which is layers, how we add an object to a layer, and then also how we can delete history. Everybody good so far? Tons of little tiny pieces. All right. So with that, file new, don't save, and about an hour and 20 minutes in, let's do our first lecture activity. So let's go right here. And we're going to go into Intro to 3D. And then I'm going to go to 1.3 because this is the one that is tied to the lectures. Now, again, make sure that if you need to watch the lecture again, you are going to the archive. I will tell you honestly, I could probably count on my fingers the amount of pages that there is not a link to the archive. So if you haven't noticed yet, right here, pretty much on every one of the lecture pages, there's a link that takes you here. That brings you to the lecture activities. So from here, we're going to grab the snapping. Did that one? Yeah. Okay. Show in folder. Now I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to go right here to my documents. Week 1, lecture 2, paste that in. So again, make sure that you're going through the entire process, unzipping the project, moving it to a location that you can find it. You don't have to match me to a T, but if you need to kind of keep up with it, go for it. From there, we want to make sure that we open it correctly. So first we need to make sure that Maya's open. We've already done that. Then I'm going to go right here to File, Open. And what do I need to do first? Set project, exactly. So right here, go to Set Project. And what do I set it to? The main folder, yes, exactly. So if we go right here, main folder, hit Set. And then we have to open up the scene. Setting the project does not actually open up the scene. Now, some of y'all may have a question about like, all right, is there only one project, meaning like one scene per project? No, typically no. Like when you get into your props, think of a project as the entire video game, all right? And then the scenes are your individual levels. So when you're working on your competency 2, which is your props, you will make one project for your competency and then do all your objects inside of that project. So that way they can actually have their own ecosystem. But when we switch projects, we always have to set to a new one. All right, so now let's start talking about this right here. So what I'm going to do is, this is a little bit claustrophobic right here, all this UI. So if you want to, now you got to make sure that you turn it all back on before you save for the day. But I'm going to go ahead and minimize all my UI by quickly pressing Control Spacebar. And then if I want to bring it back, Control Spacebar, and it brings it back. So with that, I need to hide this. All right, so the goal of this project right here is that we are going to, with pinpoint accuracy, rebuild the one on the other side right there. Now we have all these blocks, and we want to match this to a T. I mean, like everything perfectly aligned, matching exactly, but instead of there, it's going to be here. All right. Now, how many people, when you were moving around, kind of felt stuff was very sloppy when you actually were moving around your diorama pieces or moving around the Mr. Potato Head? Like it felt a little bit cumbersome. All right. That's because you were freehanding it. Well, we're going to show you how you can actually do something that is very uncommon, which is I'm going to show you how to be both accurate and fast. And to do that, first, we have to talk about a few things. First, actually, let's go ahead, bring this over. We have to talk about what this is right here. So let's go ahead and bring this up. And actually, nope, that just disappeared. All right, so W, we have to talk about what, and I'm hitting plus and minus on my keyboard to like make this smaller or bigger, because I don't want you focusing on anything else except for that little square. Who remembers what that little square is? The center, we can actually select it, and we can move all our axes in 3 dimensions. That is our 3-dimension, but it actually goes by a different name. This is what we call the pivot, P-I-V-O-T. All objects have a pivot, and that is where when we move it, translate it, rotate it, scale, all that stuff right there, that's where the action happens from. Now, for most objects, it's always going to be in the center. The thing is that if we move the pivot away from our object, now whatever we do is going to be affected by the pivot now being off to the side. Now, right now, transform doesn't do too much. But if we go right here and rotate it, now it's rotating around that pivot. If we go right here to scale it, it's scaling from that pivot. Controlling the pivot is important. That's how you can actually accurately move stuff around, because that is how things move. When we move stuff, when we build stuff, everything's always happening from the pivot. Now, if that didn't like flex your brain right there, let's go ahead and talk about the fact that, let me go right here. Got to talk about X, Y, and Z, or orientation. All right. So right now we have Y is up, Z is depth, we have X is left and right, right? Well, what if I told you there is multiple orientations based off of how you see things? So let's go right here and let's turn it. So right now, what we're looking at is I currently have the block turned. But when I go into transform mode, our Y is still up, our X is still left and right. Nothing's changed with that right there. This is what we refer to as world/global. World, W-O-R-L-D, global, G-L-O-B-A-L. One of those words is right, but global/world, which means everything observes the world's X, Y, and Z. That is like us as the planet Earth. We know magnetic north. We know the latitude and longitude. All of us observe that. That's great. But we can go right here and change its orientation to how this object sees X, Y, and Z. And to do that, I'm going to hold down W. What is W? What hotkey is that? It is transform. It's the hotkey for transform. So if we hold down W and left click, we will get another marquee menu. And right here where it says world, let's go ahead and change that to object. And now if we look, what is the pivot now doing? What is the orientation now doing? It's going based off the shape, yes. And the idea is that this right here is how the object sees the world. So I view directly up, completely different than somebody who's in Australia. All right, that's completely different angles. So we can change the orientation based off of how that object looks. Now you're probably going like, why is that important? Well, let's say I want to duplicate this in a nice diagonal pattern. So if I go right here, well, if I keep it in world mode, I kind of have to like kind of mess around and hopefully get a line. But instead, if I go right here and change this to object mode, this is going directly up. So all I have to do is this. Changing the orientation can help us do complex stuff a little bit easier. It's just kind of wrapping your head around the fact that there's different ways to see up, down, left, and right. And this is not even the end of this right here. What if I told you that we can go to the cellular level and go off of the individual components pivot? Now, with that, we're not going to use too much of that right there. It's just letting you know that there's world, there's object. It changes based off of what that object does. Now, by default, transform will always be world. Meanwhile, rotate and scale will always be object. They will always stay oriented to that object. Now, let's go right here, Z back. Now, that's pivot. And the fact is that we can actually move our pivots by holding down D, as in dog. If we hold down D as in dog, I can move this into any direction that I need, making a custom pivot. Do all that. Now, D moving around the pivot, that is a single hotkey and a single purpose. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about is something called snapping. S-N-A-P-P-I-N-G, snapping. So right now, when we move stuff around, we're doing it freehand. But there is a way to have it snap to certain key milestones in our world. And that way, making it easier for us to manipulate it. The first one is going to be the grid. We can actually snap to every cross section on the grid right here. And to do that, we hold down the X key. X as in Xavier or X-Men. So when we hold down that key, you will notice that this is turning into a circle. That means that it is in snapping mode. So when I go to move around this, if I grab this center circle, what I'm going to do is snap. So right now I'm snapping to the grid. And now it's only moving to the cross sections. So X, if I grab the middle circle, which is allowing me to move it in all axes, that is snapping. Now, if I go right here and only do one axis, I will align, because it will only move itself in that one direction. So all three axes snapping. That means it will, in all three axes, move to that point. One axis, we will align it, which means it will actually just kind of move it to that point only in that one direction. So if I'm trying to get everything kind of flush, but not on top of each other, I will align it. If I want everything to snap on top of themselves, that will be snapping. Now, next, we can use B, the letter B. Can anybody guess what that probably allows us to snap to? Yes, online got it. Vertex. Every one of our vertexes right here is a milestone, a landmark that we can actually snap to. Or if we want, align to. And the last one is a catch-all, which is C, which is component. It pretty much allows us to snap to everything else that is not a grid unit or a vertex. In this case, if we have an edge right here, it will snap to the edge. If we have a curve, holding down C will allow us to snap to the curve. Now, it is important that you realize that each one of those is a separate hotkey. D as in dog is pivot, moving around. V as in Victor is vertex snapping. X as in Xavier is grid snapping. C as in component is component snapping. But we can actually use that together. So let's say I want to stack this on top of this brick right here. Well, for some of y'all, which I've already seen some people submit this project already without knowing what they were supposed to do. They were just like, hey, we're just stacking stuff together. And it looks like this is what they did. They just, right here. And got it as close as possible. See how slow that is? And the fact is that we're not really putting them on top of each other. They're probably overlapping a little bit, or there's like a little bit of a gap there. And the thing is that is a sucky way to work. What instead we need to do is have a way of having them set on top of each other. The problem is that Maya only really sees the pivot. Those objects have no mass. They pass through each other. I can go ahead and slam them through themselves all day. So if our movement's based off the pivot, we can use the pivot to be our physics, our stopping point. So if I want the bottom of this right here to meet the top of this, what I need to do is tell this to align itself here. Now, what is in this area at the bottom of our object that is a milestone that we can use? What? Edges, we could use edges, but also what connects to the edges? Faces, last one. Vertex, yes. So right there, if I hold down D as in dog and B as in Victor, that now allows me to grab my pivot and snap it to one of these vertexes. So once I do that, since this is where the action is happening, now I only have to hold down B as in Victor. So I let go of D. This is why I have these like call outs at the bottom, because again, all these letters sound the same. So I'm holding down only B, and I'm going to drag this to the corner of this. And now they're perfectly on top of each other. And I didn't have to zoom in. I didn't have to like make sure that like they're not overlapping. The fact is that they are snapped together. So the best way to think about this is Figure out where your object needs to go and where it needs to meet the other object, and then move your pivot to that. Oh, we will be doing several times. So like I'll show you in a second. So somebody was asking how we snap it together. We're about to actually do that repeatedly. So again, best way to think of it, and online, I apologize, you can't see the visual aid or anything like that. I have my bottle of water. So if I want this to sit on top of my virtual table, where do I need to put the pivot for my bottle? At the bottom. That's because it stops where it meets the pivot. So if I move it down to the bottom, I can just snap it to the top of the table. What's up? So we will actually talk about that. That's actually part of our second part of our professionalism. So we'll get to that in due time. But spoilers, there is a center pivot button. All right. So I'm gonna go right here. Now let's go ahead and get this into shape. So like I said, is there a way to reset the pivot placement? Yes, we will actually show this after we get done moving all these. All right. So the first thing that we need to do is, like I said, we want this shape. We want to match up with this shape right here, but we want it in this area. So instead of snapping, what do we need to do? There's two things that we could actually do when we actually use the hotkeys. We can snap or align, exactly. So if I want this aligned to this object right here, I need to move my pivot to one of the ends, and then I can align it by holding down V and pull this up until it aligns all the way in the Y. So right now it's flush with the Y. And then I'm going to hold down V again and move it in the other axis until it lines up. Remember, snapping will move it in all directions. Aligning is when we are moving it in only one direction at a time. And that's how we can get them lined up. All right. V. So holding down V will allow me to move around my pivot. Now, I know most of y'all are probably already trying to do it right now. I'm probably getting frustrated. How many people are already trying to do this instead of taking notes? All right, so here's the thing. This will take time. This is why we're giving you a simple block thing. Don't try to rush through this and get your blocks put together. This is more of a safe environment for you to get used to snapping because, again, it's another muscle memory thing. It is not going to work reliably for a bit. You have to work towards that. So to let you know, starting out is perfectly fine to grab the handles, and then with the handles, move it around. That's going to be your most reliable way. Holding down the hotkey and grabbing the handles, moving them around. But there is a faster way. When you click on the axis, you lock it into that movement. So if I click Y, now it's locked into that movement. It can only move in Y. If I click right here, it's locked only in X. If I click right here, that little box, this will move it in all three axes. And the reason why that's important is because you don't actually have to touch these handles to move it. If you activate the axis that you want anywhere on your screen, you can middle mouse click and drag. Which means also, if I want to align this, instead of me dragging it where I need to go, I can hold down just B and middle mouse and scratch. The best way I can describe it is scratch over where I want it to go. So middle mouse, click and scratch, and it will hop immediately to where it needs to be. Same way, if I go right here, click the Y, hold down V, middle mouse, click and scratch over that. Actually, it needs to be here. So if you want to practice that, stay a little bit longer in this activity and get used to it. Don't try to rush through and just put your blocks together and be like, hey, I'm done. This is here not for you to just show me that, hey, I put the blocks together. This is to help you kind of mess around and get used to snapping, because snapping makes you a lot faster. Now, let's go ahead and move these off to the side. And actually, I went a little bit too fast on that one right there. So let's go ahead and get this one going. So this needs to be flipped straight up and down, right? All right, so there's a couple ways that we can go about doing that. We can eyeball it, which as an artist and a professional, you should never do. We can also go into the channel box editor right here. And notice as I'm, Greg Campus, I know that you're like 30 feet away from the screen, but I will assure you, as I move this little attribute right here is changing. And what I can do is, as I move it, I can type in the value that I want it to be. Now, how many degrees are in a circle? 360. So do yourself a favor and learn the breaks, which is 15, 30, 45, 90, all that stuff right there, because you'll type in those numbers a lot. In this case right here, if I want this to be completely straight up and down, it needs to be 90 degrees. Wrong way. That way? Nope. Oh, I'm selecting the wrong one. There we go. There we go. I'm even having a hard time seeing these numbers. All right, so we got that right there. Now, this whole thing is to like prove the point. Not probably the best way to actually go about doing it. It's there if you need it, but how about we actually turn on snapping on a rotate? And to do that, I'm gonna go right here, bring back my tools, and just let you know, never select these to activate your tools. You should do the WER. But you can double click on these to get access to their settings. Inside of here, if we go down to step snap, let's go ahead and turn that on. And we're going to set that to absolute. And we can tell that to turn it every 15 degrees. So that way, actually, we want to make sure that we do that inside of the rotate. So go right here. We're going to go into our rotate, turn on absolute, and then set that to 15 degrees. So that way, when we rotate it, it's going to snap to every 15 degrees. And then we're going to go right here and turn off. So we're going to go into our attributes, turn on absolute, set it to 15 degrees, and then turn it back off. That's because we don't want snapping on all the time. Instead, we're going to use the letter J, as in Jared, and we're going to activate snapping. So J will activate that snapping. Now, does anybody know what the difference between, want to know the difference between relative and absolute? No, nobody's looking. All right, I'll just explain it anyway. All right, so all it means is that absolute will always lock to 0, 15, 30, 45. No matter how you had it angled before, it will always lock it back into those axes. Relative will take what it originally had. So if I had already 8 degrees, when I go to rotate it, it will add 15 to that already 8 that was there. So it relatively adds it in. Absolute will always lock to those cold angles. All right, so with that, I'm going to hold down J. Get that? And then I'm going to hold down D as in dog, V as in Victor. And then I'm going to drag my pivot down to the corner right here. So D as in dog, V as in Victor. And then only holding down V, I'm going to drag this up. And then I'm going to snap it. So I'm going to hold down V, make sure that's locked to the Y, and I'm going to scratch over that vert. Then I'm going to hold down V after I select the X-axis and middle mouse click and drag over that. And now it's aligned. Next, I'm gonna go right here and rotate this as well. So I'm gonna hold down J, and we need to get that hunch at the bottom. And then again, I'm gonna hold down V as in Victor. I'm gonna select the Y axis. And then I have it in this corner right here. So I want to match up with the same corner on the other one. So this bottom one right here. And then I'm going to hold down B and select my X and then scratch over this corner. Now, I'll be repeating it several times. And then I'm going to go ahead and since this one right here is on the front, I'm going to align it to one of the ones right here. And now that one is looking good. Now we don't have to just align it in one axis at a time. We can go ahead and snap it. So now that we have these already set, let's go ahead and snap this right here. So if I go right here and hold down D as in dog, V as in Victor, this will snap my pivot. And what I'm going to do is pick an obvious corner that lines up with this right here. So which one of these three corners should I do? This one right here, or this one right here? The middle one? Yep. So either one of these two back ones are perfectly fine. It's this one right here that does not have a clear counterpart. So if I go right here with D as in dog, V as in Victor, I'm going to snap it to right there in that corner. And then I'm going to go ahead and holding down B, I'm going to grab that circle and drag it right here until it lines up with the vertex that matches up with that one right there. And then we rinse and repeat. So I'm going to go ahead. Before I rotate it, let's go ahead and move our pivot. I'm going to move it to that corner. And then I'm going to hold down J to rotate it around. From there, we have that corner. So this aligns to either the left or the right. Which one's the right one? Left or right? Left one or the right? Yep, the right one. So again, we move the pivot to the corner, and then we want to match it up to the corner where we want it to go. Same thing. We're going to rotate this. I'm going to hold down J. Get that straight. All right. So if we're looking at this object, which corner should I probably put it on? The left or the right? Somebody already said left. Hold down D as in dog, V as in Victor. I'm going to snap it to one of those back left ones. And then I'm just going to pick this one right here and just snap it right there. So again, what I did was I unlocked the center square, and then I held down V as in Victor, and middle mouse click and drag. Now it doesn't look like I'm scratching that much. That's because once you get used to it, you don't really have to do that much of a drag. But right now, you should exaggerate it to see how it's snapping around. What's up? They should be. That's the funny thing is that like even that hotkey cheat sheet is missing some, but the main ones that you're looking for are going to be there. I don't think the D key is actually on there. So, but if you need to know, and then last but not least, let's go ahead and move this one right here. D as a dog, V as in Victor. And then we're going to snap it right there. And I bet I could get two of y'all who have never done this before right here and give y'all, make one person try to put them together by not using snapping. And the person that, other person have them snap. And I bet the person who's snapping will get it done in like a third of the time. And that's why it's important that you work on those skills of snapping, because it saves you so much time. And it's very rarely that we can have something that's fast and also accurate. I know it sounds hectic, and a lot of people will just put their blocks together and call it a day and not practice it. The whole idea right here is for you to play around, and then once you feel like you're comfortable with it, then put it together, take your screenshot. What's up? So what somebody just said was, well, snapping work on round objects? It works on everything. Yep. Not only can it work on round objects, it can work on multiple objects. It can also work on your components as well. So if I go right here, if I wanted to, I can take my vertex and then hold down V. I can snap my vertex to right there. Snapping works on everything. All right. So with that said, that is our first lecture activity. Also, you probably didn't notice I haven't done a single thing the whole entire lecture, which is, anybody can guess? I have not saved once. My disclaimer, never use me as an indicator on when to save. Make sure that you save every 15 to 25 minutes. It may seem like it's simple when I do it. I have over 15 years of doing this right here. It may take you longer. It will crash. You want to safeguard against that right there. So make sure that you're saving often in increments. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and do our screenshot. So what we want to do is, I'm going to go right here, bring everything back, and then I'm going to bring up quad view. Now, we're going to do something a little bit different. Prior, you only did perspective. Here, we have to see all 4 views because we have to make sure that it's lining up in all 4 views. So for this, first, I need you to turn off the text. I'm the one that wrote it. I do not need to see it. So then we need to frame up in every one of our views. Missing one view, like if one view is like off to the side like that right there, 25% off. All views need to be there. Go away, text. Make sure that they're framed up nicely, by which, again, don't have it like that. Don't have it all off to the side right there. Get in there and do some nice compositions. And make sure that I can clearly see everything. Nothing's being cut off. Now, we're almost done. We have to do one last thing that we haven't talked about, which is we already know the 2 display types, which is right now we're seeing wireframe, we're seeing shaded. And then also we can actually see wireframe. Well, what we need to see is them both at the same time. And that's when we can activate a hybrid mode called wireframe on shaded. I will let you know if you ever want a critique or feedback, this is the mode that you need to take a screenshot of your stuff because it gives us the best of both worlds. And to activate it, we go right here to shading, wireframe on shaded, and we'll activate this. That's why this one right here looks a lot different from this. How do you get rid of the text? You turn it off inside the channel box. All right. Can you tear off the perspective if you are using multiple screens? Yes, you can. All you have to do is go right here. And I wouldn't say tear it off. I would say panel, tear off copy. And then bam, you have a copy of that right there. You can put it on multiple monitors. Now, just letting you know, a second monitor is going to be your best friend. If you have a TV or something like that, a lot of people I've seen actually use that. But yeah, this is very cramped, and a lot of artists use multiple screens. Now, with that, we have to activate wireframe on shaded on all our views to get full credit. And to do that, we have to go to each view and activate it. Luckily, there's a hotkey. Click the window, hit Alt 5. Put your cursor over to the next one, Alt 5. And that will activate wireframe on shaded in all your views. If you miss one view, 25% off. I know it sounds very, very strict, but that's the point. Is making sure that you meet all those requirements. What's up? Me personally, yes, but I'm probably the strictest out of all the instructors because I'm the one that came up with all this stuff right here. I hold people more accountable. The reason for the text right there is because with it there, it blocks pretty much a lot of your stuff. And then certain views, people will try to frame up on the text, which means that their like figurines are like this small. Now, you can leave it up as long as you crop it out as far as like it's not in frame. Granted, on top view, it's going to block stuff. Yeah, just make sure that turn it off. Just turn it off. That text is for you as a cheat sheet. I do not need to see it. What setting do you change to get wireframe on shaded turned on? It is Alt-5, and you have to do it every one. And then from there, let's take our first screenshot. What's up? That is a great question. So, nice little segue. So just letting you know, in 3DF, once something is graded, you cannot resubmit it for a regrade. But as long as it hasn't been graded, you can resubmit it. Yep. Especially if it's a competency. If you are now looking at this and you're doing your competency 1.4 and you're like, I didn't do that right whatsoever. Just write a note in the feedback section going like, stop, don't grade it. And then when you submit the right one, add like a V2 at the end. All right. What's up?
So you want, as part of the deliverable, the object and the grid, I notice that yours is spent grid, it's one side of it. Does that have to be aligned like that, or as long as you just?
So these are not really snapped to the grid. Yeah, they're aligned. They have to be aligned to each other right there. Yeah, it doesn't have to be aligned to the grid. So somebody was asking about the placement. And the thing is that I should, when I look down the front, only see one of them. And not this. Like if I say two, I'm not dumb. Well, I'm not dumb. It never makes me angry or anything like that. It's just that the whole point is for you to practice aligning and also snapping. The difference right there. So you want to make sure that they are aligned with each other. But as far as snapping them the grid, no, don't worry about that. All right. And with that, let's go ahead, hit up, take our screenshot, hit save, and we're going to save this in the correct location. So documents, 3DF, week 1, lecture 2, and we're going to name this last name underscore first name underscore snapping. Hit save. And that is our first lecture activity. Crap. Make sure that's framed up in all the views. I want to make sure that I'm giving y'all good examples. All right, what's up? Say that again. So what somebody is asking is for the naming, do we have to do the underscore on that stuff right there? Here's the thing. It's good to make sure that you're professionally naming it, but if you submit it correctly, we will never see that name. All right. So if you want to do camel casing or underscore, either one's fine. Now, when it comes to the competency where we can actually see the naming structure, use the underscore. Yep. All right. Now, we're not completely done with this because we have to explore the last 2 bits of our professionalism. So we already talked about deleting history, removing that, and how we want to do that every few saves so that way we prevent corruption. We also talked about how we can add this to a layer. We're not going to do this one for this one right here. But the last 2 that we need to do is 1, as we move stuff around, we are getting what is called transforms. And remember, transforms, everything, when we move it around, it has an address. And by default, it's always the address from the origin, all right? Which is great while modeling. Kind of sucks when you are trying to do other types of modeling, but majorly when you're trying to do animation. Animation works off of transforms by looking at frame 1, looking at its position, and then looking at its position at frame 10. So objects having transforms can be a problem. And that's where we need to freeze transforms. And to do that, we select all our objects and go to modify, freeze transforms. And what that will do is now say that this is now its new origin position. And it got rid of its transforms, and we should see 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1. That is now its new default spot. Now, occasionally, you will go to freeze your transforms. and Maya will yell at you right there saying so-and-so has incoming connections. And that is because right now your most used hotkeys are probably WER, right? Hopefully you're using them. Translate, rotate, scale, which happens to be badly placed above the hotkey, the letter S, as in snake sound. All right, snake. I should have just said snake. But anyway, that is the animation key hotkey. When you press S, it adds an animation key for all your channels. And the problem is that you can't freeze transforms because that's a failsafe. If you freeze transforms on something that has animation, you destroy your animation. So Maya stops you. We're not animating. So what we can do to fix this, to allow us to freeze our transforms, we can go right here to edit, keys, delete keys, and that will remove all animation keys, allowing us to freeze transforms. So that's how we freeze transforms. Next, if you notice, we have all these wonky pivots because we've been snapping everything around. What we want to do now is return those pivots to their natural center. And to do that, all we have to do is select this, modify, center pivot. That right there is your professionalism. So you have to layer your stuff, and we'll talk about layering more when we actually revisit 1.4. Then you also have to delete all your history on all your objects that you've made. You have to freeze all your transforms on all the objects that you make, and you have to center your pivot. We really, really hit you hard on professionalism, to the point where we know artistic-wise, we give you a little bit of leeway, a little bit more forgiveness. That's why we weight professionalism a lot higher. You, for your grade, professionalism, week 1, your professionalism is going to make up about 15 to 20 points. Missing that right there, you're going to pretty much tank your grade. Now, to make you feel better, if you select all your objects and go right here, these little icons inside poly modeling, this is center pivot, this is delete history, this is freeze transforms. By just doing that, you made 15 points. What's up? Yep. Yeah, when you go to turn it in, you want this to be clean. Same way if you are working in a pipeline, you want to make sure that your stuff is going to the next person clean. Yeah. So that right there is important. I've seen people have an average objects, but they did their professionalism, and it took something that was a C level grade to like a 85 to a 90. And then I've seen people have amazing stuff, and then their professionalism completely not done, and it tanks their grade. You got to make sure that you do that. Everybody wants to build, but you have to have that clerical part. What? So if somebody's asking about the potato head, no, because I can't see any of that stuff through an image. But when it comes to when you submit projects and scenes, you definitely want to make sure you do that. And you'll usually do it typically the last save that you're going to turn in. All right. Any questions? Now, obviously, I'm not going to save this because I want it ready to go. All right. So with that said, that is our first lecture activity. So now let's go ahead and do what is essentially a primer for your 1.4. All right. Let's go ahead and start shaping these objects into references. So again, if you did not do any of this your first lecture, don't worry about it. That's the point. We're building off of this right here. So your first lecture, if you did not freeze transforms, delete your history or anything like that, you're safe. You're fine. All right. But going forward, now that we know, we're good. All right. So with that, you're going to go right here, and we're going to grab our first lecture activity. And we're going to go shape out. We're going to go show in folder. And again, I'm going to double click on it to temporarily unzip it, right click, copy it. Then I'm going to go into my documents, 3DF, week 1, week 2, and I'm going to paste that in. From there, I'm gonna clear my scene, set my project. You gotta get in this habit. A lot of people will immediately go into the project, which let's go ahead and show you what that looks like. A lot of people will miss that step. Open this up. Open up the wrong one. It's that time of the lecture. The brain's frying out. All right. And they'll miss that important step of setting your project. You can't sleep on that. Without setting your project, you will not see the images that you need to model against. So, go right here, File, Open, Set Project. Shaping out, it's set. Open up the scene. All right, and there we go. So, with that, what we're going to do is build all these objects using everything that we've learned so far. Now, this right here is exactly a primer of what you're going to be doing. Every one of these objects is one object each. And all we're going to do to make them is manipulate, picking the right object, adding the divisions that we need, and then manipulating those components to what we need to do. So first, we got this weird accordion thing. So how would I go about making this? And again, I am going between this right here, moving around with the camera. So this is why it's important to kind of get used to popping between the cameras, getting used to moving around the cameras, because now if you get used to it, you're no longer thinking about it. Instead, you're thinking about how you're strategizing this. So with this, how would I go about making that accordion shape? Like we have, like, the top, middle, the bottom, those look pretty spot on. But what do we need to do about that second and fourth edge loop? Take the edges. So I got one edge. What should I do? The edge loop, exactly. So let's go ahead and select the edge loop. Now, I could, if I wanted to, here's the thing. We could do it with face mode, probably not the best way to do that right there. We could do it vertex mode, and it really comes down to what is easier to select. I will do my way, but you got to realize that there's 100 different ways to do the same thing. All right. That's why it's important that you talk to each other, share ideas, also talk to other instructors, because my way may make sense one time, and then another time, like, Erica or Adriana's ideas would actually make more sense. And that's where you piecemeal your methodology. All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and select that edge loop and what? Scale. All right, let's go right here. I'm going to scale it to match. And then just do the same thing down here. Yeah, that makes sense. So just let you know, what we did was wrong. And this happens a lot. Can anybody guess what we probably did wrong? We scaled on one axis, we skewed. And here's the thing. At this stage, I'm not telling you to not have confidence in yourself, but you should second guess yourself, which is right now, when we pop into a window, we get tunnel vision. And we look good right there, right? The problem is that the second that we go into the other view, you have to double check yourself. Make a movement, check all your windows, make sure that not only is it lining up in the other views, but it reads well in 3D. That's why we need to go right here. And instead of skewing, we uniformly scale it. Instead of using these, we use that uniform scale. And now we're manipulating it in all axes. Look, double check. Always double check yourself, because it's very easy to, oh, this looks great, let's keep on moving on. And then when you look at 3D, you're like, oh man, what I did like 15, 20 minutes ago, I screwed up. Well, you can't Z back because you already did like 15 and 20 minutes worth of other work. So again, always double check yourself. Next, we got this. So We got the shape right here, and we have this Black Widow symbol. So at this point right here, what would probably be the best way to go about doing this? So probably not faces, because faces a little bit harder to kind of like bend and get it to shape, but we definitely could do edges. We go right here and grab an edge. We can move that around. Likewise, if we can do it with an edge, what else can we do it with? What's at the bottom of the upside down triangle? The vertices, yes. So we can do it with the edge, we can do it with the vertice. Now, we have to be careful with doing it with the vertices. We click on that vertice and move it. What are we doing? It's not adding another one. It's that there's one in the front and one in the back. When we click on it, we are only clicking on one of them. What should I do instead? Yes, marquee select. This will select both. So that way when I move it, it's moving both. So let you kind of see what's going on right here. What originally I was doing is I grabbed this one, and notice how it only grabbed the front one. And when I move it, that front one moves, but the other one stays behind. If I want these to move and keep flush with each other, I need to move them both at the same time, because even this right here, I could go back and fix this. And actually, it's not that hard of a fix. Again, remember, we can snap anything. But that was 4 steps, when all I could do is 2 steps. Same way, go right here, move that to that corner. And again, marquee select, move, marquee select, move, move. And then let's get this a little bit lower. And what I did was I selected all the vertexes in this area. And this time I will skew it. Kind of bring them both in at the same time. And again, get close enough. I look at these pictures a grand total of maybe 4 seconds each. I've seen this material long enough that that's all I need to take to grade it. I'm not going to go and zoom in and say, all right, you are 2 pixels off right here. Now, if you turn it in like this, and it really looks really off, then yes, you'll lead to a deduction. But if it's, for the most part, about 75, 80% what needs to be there, you're usually good on the artistic side. All right. Next, we have this witch hat. And we have a comb. Now, just letting you know, when it comes to certain types of geometry, especially if it has triangles, the only way that you can add, you want to make sure that you add your edge loops before you start moving it. All right, because it gets a little hectic and hairy trying to add those in. So in this case, we have a little bit more complexity than we did on the other objects right here. So what we need to do is look at which image gives us the best amount of information to be able to form the shape. Which image gives me the best information on my shape that I could probably match up with best? Bottom left, exactly, because right here we have the top. I couldn't even tell you what the top is doing. All right, so, and then we have the side right here, which is the bottom right, which is, we can kind of see the angles, but they're sloping, so it's harder to match. Meanwhile, the fronts right there, we can see those angles clear. So all we need to do is move our edge loops to match up with that. Now, big hint, and this may help you on like 1.4, but notice how we left the wireframe on the reference. Everybody first learned how to draw by doing what? Tracing, exactly. Do the same thing here. So let's go right here, and I'm going to select an edge. So how do I select an edge loop? Double click, right? Well, it's not happening. Can anybody guess why? What? So I have the edge right here, and I'm double clicking on it. So I'm left clicking, and let's do right here. So again, this is a trick question, and it reaches back to something that we talked about maybe in the first 25 minutes, which is what prevents our tools and selections from working? What is that? That is a 20-sided ingot. So as far as mine is concerned, that's not an edge loop around it. Edge loops have to have proper geometry on both sides for it to work. So like I said, problem geometry breaks your method. Now we're going to leave that be. That's not a problem. We can actually even hack it by, you don't want to delete it, but the fact is that you got to realize that problem geometry will stop you dead in your tracks sometimes. Now, it's very easy to get around that. Instead of selecting edges, let's go ahead and select the vertexes. Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy. And from here, since now I have quads right here and quads above, now I can select my edge loop by double clicking on it. And what I want to do is just start lining this up to the edge flow that we're seeing right here. So don't just bring that down and bring that over. I'm going to just scale that out just a bit and then rinse and repeat. Now, who remembers the order of movements that I talked about with the potato head? What order do I like to go with? Translate first and then what? Rotate and then scale. Same thing right here. Before I can figure out my rotation, I need to get this in the right position. And what I'm going to do is kind of line up in the middle right here, almost like a seesaw, like the fulcrum. And now I can start turning this to match the angle. And then once I match that angle, once I start matching that angle, I can now see whether or not it needs to rotate. And then next, I'm gonna go right here, rinse and repeat. Move this to the center. So that way this edge right here starts matching up. Now I'm gonna start rotating that. Now there is something wonky going on with my rotates. So I'm gonna go right here and yep, it's going off component mode. That's where that cellular level like nonsense is coming from. So I'm gonna go right here, reset this. If your tools are feeling off and weird and they don't seem to be working the way that they're working for me, you can always double click on it and tell it to rotate. Now, how many people have already started working on this right here? All right, a couple people right here. All right, so we're going to see in a second if you ran into an issue. And it's always a great way to talk about it. So we're going to match up, and there we go. We are matching up with that right there. Now, we got our first three, but now we need to do this. And again, both of these need to be one object each. Because I know a lot of people, what they'll do is actually just take two pyramids and just stack them on top of each other. I don't grade that. All right, so what we need to do is make this. So I've already said what probably has to go here. What shape should we use for this? We can use a cone. Problem is the cone is too round. And even if we bring this down, like let's down 4, we could technically do that. That is what? 1, 2, 3 steps? Or we go right here and make a pyramid. Again, it is very instrumental that you know what is there. It's always a game of clicks. So I'm gonna go right here. I'm gonna scale this up. Now, how many edges do I need to add here? So how many people will say one more? How many people say two more? How many people say three more? How many people did not vote whatsoever? All right. And we still have people not voting. All right. So for the people who said two, why do we need two? Exactly. One of them to hold the shape, preserve it, and then one to change. So we need to preserve that top rim, and then we need to have one to change it to that narrow one. Exactly. So when we ever see a change, that change is only possible if we hold the outside silhouette. So if we go right here and add two more subdivisions, we get that. So we now have one for that outside rim, and then we have one that go right here and taper in. So I'm going to go ahead, line that up a little bit more, and then I'm going to go right click, go into vertex mode, and move this up. Has anybody seen this happen? Or has it happened to you? It will. So let's go ahead and explain what's going on right here. So this is a really awesome tool, and it's really great to model with. But right now, it's going to scare the hell out of you and stop you dead in your tracks. And what this is called the soft move tool. We will actually get into it really quick. What it does is add a fall off. When we grab the vertex to begin with, when we move it, we move only that vertex. With soft move, we have a fall off in the area effect, almost pulling it like taffy, allowing us to get really, really cool shapes. Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, how did it turn on? Well, remember our hotkeys, X, C, and V, grid, component, vertex snapping. That's right next to the B as in boy key, which is the hotkey to activate this. All we have to do is go right here, press B, and it goes away. And the reason why I have to bring this up is because it's very easy, especially when you're doing snapping, to hit that B key. And if you don't know what you're looking at, then it turns into what I like to call like the Technicolor dream coat of death. It's a lot easier saying soft select, but it's great. Really easy to like do some really cool shapes, but not really easy when you're trying to make fine movements. So we're gonna hit B, bring that up, scale that out, and I'm going to bring this up, but I don't want to eyeball it. So what I'm going to do is hold down B as in vertex and snap it. So that way it's aligned, and all I have to do is scale that in. And then I'm going to double check myself, and that looks good. And again, if you go there and just make two pyramids and stack them on top of each other, I will know. And you will not get credit. All right. So we happen to have a C shape right here. So what shape should we go with? If we look right here, it's pretty round. So cylinder, yeah, because we want this to be completely enclosed. And the reason why I bring this up is because everybody, remember, you have a C shape as your 1.4. And the reason why I have this in here is because not only to kind of give you a leg up, I like to do like little Easter eggs, but also I got tired of people making toruses. Bring them up and doing this. I will not count it if you do that. It has to be completely enclosed. All right. So again, I'm warning you as we go. I've been doing this for a while. You're not going to outsmart me. So with that, we're going to go right here, and I'm going to bring in a cylinder. And what I want to do is go ahead and I'm going to just guess how many subdivisions I want along the height. So I'm gonna go right here and say probably about that many. I'm gonna say that many. Actually did the right number. So again, make sure that you've always watched all the lecture activity. I purposely screw stuff up for learning experiences. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and scale this down. So that way we match up with that bottom. And I want to make sure that I get in all the views. Once I get that aligned, we should be good to go. So what we can do is I can go right here, bit by bit, move this, and then rotate it. Now, I would not personally do this because I, again, will not add in more geometry that I need before I need it. But for this case, I'm gonna go right here, hold down Control, deselect this, and keep on going. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead, move that around. And then hold down Control, deselect that. Move that, and everybody's seeing a problem that I'm running into. All right. So the problem is that, yes, I do not have enough geometry. And the other problem is remember what I can't do. I can't go back here and add more. So does that mean I'm screwed? I have to rebuild it? You're aware of this right here. So this is where we introduce the only two tools that I will allow you to use. And this is to counteract this happening. Now, obviously, you should be smart enough to just count how many are supposed to be there by looking at the reference, but we can miscount sometimes, and we may need an extra edge. We may need to remove an edge. So the only tool that you're able to use, which I did say tool two, it's actually one tool, and the other tool undoes this tool. All right, so the first one that we're going to show is if you need an edge loop, you can go right here to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool. Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool. And this will allow you to click on a parallel edge. So you have to click on the edge ring that you want to go across. So I'm going to click and drag. And this will allow you to drag in a new edge. Now, this has to have very specific setup, which is it will only add in edge loops, and it will only do it across edge rings. So I could do this all day. All day. All day. But the second I try to go across triangles, wah, 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 doesn't know where to go. It won't draw across triangles. Go right here, can't do anything. Go right here, can't do anything. So if you have an area that has that pizza pie of triangles, you can't draw across it. You have to put those edges in using your settings. Now, with this, I accidentally drew in too many edges. So that is where we enter into our next tool, which is if we go right here, I drew in an extra edge. Well, how do you think I would remove it? Just backspace, right? Hit delete. Yeah, just backspace and delete. So, no. Oh, well, no, we didn't undoing it, but yeah, I went ahead and selected the edge loop and I hit delete. And it's very literal. we deleted the edge loop. Keyword literal. We will talk about that in like 5 seconds. Give it to me. All right. So if we go right here, we deleted the edge loops. We left behind all the vertexes. So essentially now that whole entire edge ring is a bunch of n-gons, and you will not be able to use tools on it anymore. That's why it's important to do the other way and the right way, which is if you select an edge loop, instead of hitting backspace, you hit Control backspace. That will remove the vertexes and the edges. So you remember how I said that if you follow all the rules of 1.4, you should not run into any problem with geometry. Missing that Control backspace will be the way that you get problem geometry. Missing that. Now, just letting you know, it is an easy fix if you actually accidentally delete that. If you have extra vertexes, all you have to do is just go right there and delete them. But again, that's 4 steps versus 1. All right, so let's go ahead, remove that. Control delete, select that, Control delete, and then we just need to add in one more. So I'm gonna go to Edit Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool, and we just need one more. So I'm gonna go right here and bring that down. Rotate that so that we get that. And then again, grab this one, move it over. And we got a C shape. And now we're going to go right here. And I'm going to frame up from the top. I'm going to frame up from the front. I'm going to frame up from the side. Get a nice angle right here on my 3D view. I'm going to turn off my reference text. No, not my reference layer. Turn off my text. I'm going to make sure that I have wireframe unshaded turned on. Please do not select them all. That does not count as wireframe unshaded because it actually makes it harder to see what's going on. Instead, you want to make sure that everything is deselected. You're going to go in each one of your views and hit Alt-5, Alt-5, Alt-5. And now this is ready for a screenshot. So I'm going to go right here. Last screenshot for today. Hit save. And I'm going to go ahead and shaping out. Hit save. What's up? Say that again? Oh, you're talking about the soft move where it started moving around like a taffy? Yeah, that's B as in boy. Yeah, that's soft select. So somebody was asking about, like, how do we turn off where it's moving everything all at once? That was soft select. All right. And with that, let's go ahead and revisit our 1.4. So I'm going to go ahead because I want to make sure everybody's aware of this. So we're going to go right here, set project. We're going to set to this one right here. And then we're going to go right here to scenes, start here. And what you're going to do is you're going to model each one of these objects. Now, to help you with modeling them, inside their specific folders, we can go to the source image folder. And not only do we have the reference images, but we also have them from different angles to help you actually see them a little bit clearer. Also, you can go to Sketchfab and see these from all different angles, so that way you can see exactly how they're made. It definitely does help to understand how many objects you have and also the primitives that are available to you. One of these objects looks a lot harder than it really is, and you will only be able to make it if you're aware of what you can make. All right, so with that, What you're going to do is, as you build these, each one of them is only going to be one object each. You cannot use multiple objects. You cannot put like a cone on top of a square to get your little pointy thing. That won't count. Anything that does not meet the requirements does not get counted as one of your objects. So to put that in practice, I'm going to go right here and I'm going to hit, go right here to File, Save As. Make sure that you're saving in increments. Even if you're just going right here, typing in start here, 0, 1, hit save. And we've already done the cup, so I'm going to give that to you right here. We're just going to go move that to right there. Get that into position. Move that into position. And then what we're going to do is let's go ahead and add those subdivisions along top. And I'm going to hit 6 on the keyboard. 2. Faces. Bring that down. Scale that out. All right. So, and then as you get done with them, so let's go ahead and imagine I did all 4 of these. So burn, burn, burn. All right. As you get done with every tier, you have to select them and then add them to their respective layer. So we already have layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. So once you're done with these, you're going to add them to that layer. So now they're part of that. So now when I go to work on my level 2, I can hide those, bring these back. Once I get done with my level 2 stuff, I'm going to add them to that layer, hide them, and move on to my level 3. Now, by default, these are set to reference modes. If you have to select them again, like right now, if I go right here and try to select these again, I can't. That means I just need to turn this back to normal for me to be able to interact with it again. So from there, so as far as layers, you definitely want to go back and revisit when we were talking, introducing it earlier, but it's just a way of organizing your stuff based off of what you want to see. I don't want to see my tier 1 stuff when I'm working on tier 2. All right, just wondering, Control Delete, is that considered dissolving? No, it's just, it's an edge loop delete. It just makes sure that you delete the edge loop properly. Gets rid of the vertex at all. All right. So with that, let's imagine that I have all 12 of these done. Actually, I'll just go ahead and pretend that we have 12 objects. All right, bam, we have 12. Please don't turn in something that looks exactly like this. I'm just trying to kind of show you what I'm talking about. But let's imagine that we have multiple saves. You should have several, but right here, save as. All right. All right, so let's say I'm completely done and all of these are on their respective layers. Add to selected. And then right here, add to selected. All right, so we have these all here. Let's go ahead and hide this. So what you want to do is before you turn it in, you want to take all your objects. So we've already got them all in their specific layers. From there, we're going to select all our objects like this. And then we're going to go to these 3 buttons, center pivot, delete history, freeze transforms. And then we want to go right here to File, Save As. Scroll down to the instructions. And you're going to name that file last name, first name, shape, and form. Go ahead and use your actual last name and first name. I've actually had that happen way too many times. And then we're going to hit save. By doing that, you got like 99% of 20 points for your professionalism. Just doing that little bit, putting on a layer, the right layer, deleting your history, freezing your transforms, those 3 buttons up at the top, and you can hit those as many times as you want. They don't undo themselves. They will just keep on doing the same thing over and over again, and then saving it the proper way. Yes, and we're actually, no, you're turning in the project. I'm actually going to show you how you do it. So once you do that and you have that saved, we're going to go ahead and close this. Once you're ready to turn in, what you're going to do is find your project that you're working on. You're going to make a copy of this. Keyword, copy. You never mess with the original, just in case something happens and you need to have access to prior saves. But what you want to do is copy this and then go to your desktop and hit paste. The reason why you want to copy this is one, we're going to go right here. We're going to go to last name, underscore first name, week one, all that stuff right there. That's what we're going to name this main folder. That's your main project folder. Hit V. Now, obviously, your last name is your last name, your first name is your first name, but what people have a question about a lot is what is your month code? Your month code is going to be 2301. 2301. So last name, first name, 3DF, 2301. Year 2023, and it's the first term of this year. Then from there, the reason why you want to do this on the copy is because I don't need to see every save that you ever made. You want to delete them out there so that only the scene you want us to grade is there. And this is important. One, is part of your professionalism. We will actually heavily dock it. But two, if it's not clear which one you want us to grade, remember how we say that we don't regrade stuff? Well, if you have everything like that, it's just like prop one, prop two, prop blah, 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 all these like 100 different scenes, we're just going to pick one and grade it as is. And if it ends up being the wrong scene, there is no oopsie, I meant this one right here. Your grade's locked in. So that's why you want to make sure that you go into the scenes folder, clear everything out, and make sure that only the scene that you want graded is there. And then I would still double check it. Set your project to this one right here, open up the scene and make sure that it is exactly the way that you want. And once you do that, you're going to go to your project folder. That's because if we go right here to the bottom, I can't submit anything because I'm a teacher, but you cannot submit a unzipped folder. You have to compress it. So we're going to go right here, send to. So if you select it, hit send to compress. Make sure that you do it that way. All right. If you use a different program, it can be a little bit of a pain in the butt. Please, to God, do not download WinRAR. There's no need for that in these day and ages. All right. So just use Windows built-in compression. So send to compress. Yes. We're working with files. We're not trying to play Super Nintendo ROMs. All right. So with that, then you can go ahead and drag it in. You submit it as a file. And once it uploads, I strongly suggest re-downloading it, unzipping it, and double checking it. I know it sounds like a lot of steps, but really it's only a couple minutes for peace of mind. All right. So that way, when you download it and double check yourself, you know this is exactly the way that we're going to see it. Any questions about submitting that? Do not submit screenshots of these items. You have to submit the project. What's up? Yes. Yeah, all 12 are going to be in there. Yes. Please do not break up your items into 3 different scenes. Like I said, we will only open up one scene. All right. So everything that I just showed is exactly how you should turn in. Also, you're probably watching this as an archive. If you go to the bottom of 1.4, everything that I just did is actually in like smaller videos, bite-sized videos, if you want to check those out as well too. Now, any other questions? Yes. So what just got said was they were asking about the snapping project and the shaping out project. Yes, those are screenshots. Those are going to go to 1.3, but the 1.4 competency has to be that project that we just talked about. All right. So next, like I said, outside of a couple Easter eggs of me showing you how to do the C shape and a couple other things. And also, again, I like Easter eggs, which if you haven't yet, visit the bottom of 3DF where it may say, how do I start doing this project? It may show you how to do the first 4. Cough, cough. All right. So with that said, outside of that, the other ones, we do not have anything other than slight hints to kind of point you in the right directions. We will not show you how to build them. All right. And this is to double check, make sure, can you take the knowledge that we talked about in the last 2 lectures and apply it to these objects? That does not mean that you can't talk to each other. All right. As long as you don't share work, you can share strategies. This is to get y'all not only on the Discord, but also talking to the people that are right next to you. Share strategies, because one of y'all may know how to do like the pumpkin and not know how to do the car. Meanwhile, somebody may know how to do the car, but may not know how to do the pumpkin. All right. That's perfectly fine. Don't share files, but you can share strategies. Next, your deadline for all this is week 1. All right. So, nope, I said that wrong. Week 1's deadline is Monday. No one corrected me. All right. So, yeah, my brain's actually at the end, but so deadline is end of Monday, 11:59 p.m. Eastern. Online, realize that we so you want to make sure you're accounting for that, because it actually will lock you out if it goes over midnight. So if you're in the process of uploading it and it clicks over into midnight, which is next day, it will lock you out. Now, with that said, if you need an extension, you have to request it in the feedback section for each assignment that you need it for. If you just write me an email and say, hey, I need extension for all my week 1, I'm going to send you back a blanket statement and go like, hey, go write them in your feedback, because we have to individually go into those assignments and open them up. Makes it easier if you actually request a feedback. What's up? You can request it up until 11 midnight on Tuesday. So essentially, what somebody asked was how far ahead. We want you to be professional and request it. I will tell you honestly, if you miss your deadline, you automatically get it. We just go ahead and give it right there, but you definitely do want to request it because we do have to individually go open up those projects to allow you to submit them. When you request an extension, you can have up to 3 additional days to submit it without any late deductions. There's no late deductions for submitting within that 3-day grace period. And it's always 3 days from the original deadline. If you turn it in 3 days and 1 minute late, it's a 0. That is a double-edged sword right there. So realize that extensions are addicting, and they are, you may want to actually listen to this. All right. So with that, extensions are addicting, and they're an issue because of the snowball effect. If you're like really late on week 1, you're going to be even later on week 2, you're even later on week 3. And the problem is that there's no extensions on week 4. There's a brick wall heading. And when you request extension, you're borrowing time from the next project. And starting with week 2, all those projects actually become one big project. So if you're going to request an extension, make sure that you are being mindful of getting it done as soon as possible and not utilizing all of it. Any other questions? All right, what's up? So what somebody asked was for the Mr. Potato Head and the snowman. I only want the screenshots that we show in lecture 1. You don't have to turn in the scenes. Yes, you want to turn in both pictures. What somebody said was turning in both pictures, but you can turn them in at different times. If you're already done with one, you can go ahead and submit that, and then you can submit the other one once you're done. As far as lecture activities, you can always do like a bulk drop, or you can turn them in as you get done. Either one's perfectly fine. Just meet your deadlines. Let's go ahead and when naming a screenshot, are you able to see the file name? I will not see the file name if you submit it correctly, but you want to make sure that it's named properly just in case you submit it incorrectly. As far as the file name at the top of Maya, it's supposed to be there. Next is when is all this due? All of this is due. Week 1 stuff is due on Monday by 11:59 p.m. Why Monday? It used to be Sunday, and I would get way too many freak out emails going like, hey, there was no support over the weekend. So like if we do it Monday, you have that extra day of support where people are actually answering their emails. So it's kind of giving you a little bit of padding. For the Mr. Potato Head, do you want our geometry to stop at the insert, or can we have them overlapping? just match up with the image. It's going to overlap a little bit, but like it's not going, I'm not going to split hairs over a few pixels. Other than that, that's all I have for y'all today. So again, make sure that you're utilizing Discord, talk to each other, work with each other, things like that. Don't share files. If you need extension, make sure that you write in the feedback section for every assignment that you need. There is lecture on Sunday. It's not mandatory to go, but you are required to watch the archive if you missed the lecture. The announcement section has the link to Zoom. I think that's it. I will see y'all on Monday.